Welcome to Bold Talk series where creativity, leadership, ideas, innovation come together. My name is Epi Ludvik, and today I have a privilege to have a short one-on-one conversation with Sam Hodges, co-founder and CEO of Vouch. Sam, great to see you. Welcome to our Bold Talk series. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Sam, let's start first looking back at the earliest chapters of your career. What personal moment made you realize that insurance was quietly becoming a bottleneck for founders rather than a safety net?
So, funnily, I actually started my career doing a ton of work in and around the insurance space, which was purely an accident. Coming out of college, I knew I wanted to do something, in the business world broadly, but really had no idea what that meant, and ended up taking a job at a strategy consulting firm in New York. And the second project I got slotted onto was a case for a very large property and casualty insurance business. And so that led to me spending about a year doing that work. And then subsequently, I ended up getting a job at an investment fund where I was focused on investing in the first wave of insurtech. This is kind of back, kind of mid 2000s, right before the great financial crisis. And long story short, learned a ton about the space, ultimately went off and built a company in the lending and capital markets category. But then as I was transitioning out of that business in 2018, got really excited about going back to, some of the stuff I'd been thinking about kind of earlier on, and teamed up with my co-founder, Travis, and our early backers at Ribbit and at the time Silicon Valley Bank to start Vouch. And what Vouch was and is all about is helping insure ambitious founders and companies. And our kind of insight into the problem was, frankly, as founders and investors, over the corpus of many different businesses, we saw how hard it was to get appropriate insurance. It can literally take, weeks, if not months, very slow and paper-based. There was no kind of digital way to interact with, insurance policies. And frankly, when coverage matters, it really matters. And so started Vouch with a belief that we could make commercial insurance really better for, everyone in the value chain, and with a particular focus on serving, kind of ambitious entrepreneurs all across the US.
Amazing. The insurance is an industry most people tolerate rather than question. As you begin Vouch, what deeply held belief about insurance did you have to unlearn in order to see what was actually possible?
It's a great question, and I agree with the comment. I mean, I think a lot of folks view insurance as either a contract or statutory requirement, tick the box, or frankly as a necessary evil, just given the kind of litigious society in which we live. Our view is insurance actually plays a really important role in any emerging or dynamic sector. And if you trace the antecedents of the insurance industry back 400 years, it was insuring ships that were, crossing the Atlantic on very dangerous, trading routes, or, going into the Indian Ocean on very dangerous trading routes, and where, you'd send 10 ships out and 2 of them wouldn't come back. And frankly, it was much better for everyone involved to have some cooperative insurance around that. Think about this in the context of crop insurance, right? If you can't hedge out a weather and commodity risk, it's very challenging to produce food or other, agricultural byproducts. Our view is that's true in a lot of different sectors, and particularly rapidly changing and emerging sectors. In the technology space, which is, a very large chunk of what we do, we really do think that insurance is something that is important to get right. For young companies, it's really around making sure you have the basics in place. And the reason for that is to ensure that, a small event can't really tip you over and cause a lot of cost and distraction. And then obviously, as a company gets bigger and more complex, as its exposures evolve, that's where getting the coverage right and making sure you have really adequate limits in place is crucially important. And the reality is bad things can happen, right? They can happen because you make mistakes. They can happen because your product malfunctions. They can happen because you have an issue with an employee, right? Either intentionally or maliciously or not. And you want to be in a position where those sorts of things that happen, and of course, those of us who built companies for a long time, we've seen these things, shouldn't eat up too much managerial time or cost. And short insurance can actually play a really important role in that. And so our belief is this is something that if you get right, it can really be good for all parties involved.
Yeah. Now, you're scaling a company in a highly regulated industry while moving at startup speed creates constant tension. Talk about leadership. What leadership decisions stressed you the most as a CEO and reshaped how you think about building teams?
Well, I think one of the hardest things about building in a space like insurance, and I think it's true in other regulated categories like health, like banking services, like certain parts of the education space, you need to get this balance right between where can you move fast and break things and where do you need to build, with rebar and concrete. And I think because of those dynamics, it leads to a very different mentality than if you were building, a very lightweight consumer app or even frankly, many different types of kind of B2B software. In these spaces, you got to get compliance and risk management and kind of capital right. And so I think honestly, the decisions that have stressed me out the most either come down to, which of those two categories does it fall into? Is this a decision where we can afford to be kind of fast and experimental and take some risk? Or is it something where we really need to get the details right so we don't run into serious, market conduct or regulatory or kind of reputational issues? The other kind of corollary to that is I think one of the hard parts about building and leading a business in a space like this is you need to actually have a hybridized culture, right? Because you're going to need to have some folks coming in from more traditional industry background, and they will be used to operating in a way that's very different from a fast moving, technology driven, technology forward startup. And so being really clear about how you hybridize that and where you're being intentional about, kind of mixing things together to kind of get a great syncretic outcome. That's it takes time and forethought, and I can't claim we always get it right, but I do think those are some of the more interesting, design decisions that you make building a company like this.
Yeah. Yeah, very good point. Now, there's almost no conversation without bringing AI in a mix of questions and conversation. With AI regulation, data privacy, and global expansion redefine risk. What is one emerging threat you believe founders are still overlooking or misunderstanding today?
Gosh, it's a great question. Vouch provides insurance for probably more AI startups than anyone else. I mean, we literally have hundreds, probably low thousands of clients in that category at this point in time. And so when we talk to those businesses, those founders, and particularly ones who are being trying to be very thoughtful about some of the risks that come with building with applied AI, a lot of it comes down to model performance risk. People have talked about some of the intellectual property related issues here in certain subcategories within AI. That certainly remains an important theme. Our view, though, is when you are claiming to the market that you're going to be able to deliver a product or service in a particular way with a particular outcome, and things don't stack up in that particular direction, there's going to be a really interesting set of questions around who ultimately is on the hook for that. And so I do think model performance related risks, does that sit with kind of the company sitting at the application layer? Or do you trace it back to the infrastructure, kind of the foundational model companies that's sitting behind those? I think there's an interesting set of questions around that and a whole set of emerging risks there that we and others are honed in on.
Now, when you think about the future you're building towards, what does success look like, not just for Vouch as a company, but for the way ambitious founders experience insurance altogether?
So today, I believe Vouch is the leading provider of insurance for ambitious venture-backed companies in the United States. Our belief is that we can take the kind of experience that we've been able to deliver, the risk advisory and kind of insurance placement capabilities we've built up and broaden in category. And also, frankly, serve companies as they get bigger and even more complex. And so for Vouch, that's really kind of what the roadmap is. My ambition for customers is to make sure that every single ambitious founder, every single ambitious company out there in the US gets their insurance and it's delivered in an experience that is transparent, incredibly efficient, fits into their existing workflows, and frankly is delivered much more like software. And so I think we are well down that path in terms of the build that we've undertaken, but there's still more work to do. And I'm excited, frankly, about how we can use AI in the context of our own business to deliver even better experiences for our clients. And that's a major investment theme as we look into 2026 and beyond.
Yeah. Now, trust is one thing that sits at the heart of insurance, but it's for everything, but especially on the insurance side, especially with founders who also move fast and question everything. How do you personally earn that trust when the stakes are high and the clock is always like
Well, I think a big piece of it comes down to responsiveness. Right? When I think about what does trust mean, I think it comes down to integrity and competence. And integrity in our business really comes down to making sure the clients are getting the right coverage recommendations and making sure ultimately that the products that they get, i.e., the insurance products that they ultimately purchase, are mapped to the risks that matter the most in their operational context. But we also need to make sure the experience we're delivering, and that comes down to making the purchase experience easy, but also, frankly, to the extent that they have a risk event, that kind of claims experience or pre-claims experience, that is one where we can be incredibly responsive to them and make sure we're doing everything we can to help them work through those difficult moments. And so I think the reality is in insurance and a lot of other spaces like this, trust is something you have to earn. Again, I'm very proud of what we've done in the context of the clients we have and in the market that we're active in, but we need to deliver on that promise every single day. And so that's a major focus in all of our client interactions and frankly, how we talk with our team.
Yeah. Um, Sam, I always like to get the personal experience about or the take about what does the word bold mean, uh, my guest, and the question, what does that mean to you, the word bold?
Well, I think it's really reinventing what an experience or product can be and benchmarking yourself not just against the best in your category, but frankly the best in any category. And I think a lot of industries have the tendency to kind of be very insular in how they think about things. They'll look across at the other company in their space that is roughly the same size as them, that has been around roughly the same amount of time, that has roughly the same business model, and ask themselves, are we doing things as well as they are? And I actually think a much bolder question is relative to best in breed in the world, right? How can this part of what we're delivering for clients, how can it work, right? And what would it take to really reinvent that product or service or experience so that, again, this is something that is not just good in the context of insurance, but good in the context of any B2B product or service. And so you obviously can't choose to do that in every area, but I do think we can and should be bold and purposeful in certain. And that's ultimately how I think you cut through the clutter of what's obviously a crowded and competitive market.
Amazing. Sam, always be bold. Thank you for joining me this Bold Talk series. Looking forward to reconnecting again. Until that time, take care, be great, and be bold always. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.